Happy fall. It's been a minute since our last Expert Insight series, and I'm so delighted to be back and spending this time with you. Back to school is always a very special time of year, and this year, parents nationwide and Mama members are experiencing new challenges as well as some incredible triumphs. The growing popularity of AI and the marketing hype around the idea of preparing kids for a digital future, even though human beings will always have human needs, means more and more kids are using AI chatbots and more schools are introducing AI products to kids. And this is happening despite the lack of safeguards, despite the warnings from the very creators of AI themselves about the dangers that AI poses for our children. And that means we are seeing new harms and too many examples of young people being manipulated, traumatized, or even driven to self-harm or suicide by these chatbots. The risks of AI mean that Mama's fight against harmful media is far from over, and we are very proud of our role in helping the California legislature recently pass the Leading Ethical AI Development, or LEAD for Kids Act. The LEAD Act prevents operators of companion chatbots from providing these products to children under 18 unless they have guardrails to protect against encouraging self-harm, disordered eating, or illegal activity, or engaging in erotic or sexually explicit interactions, or providing mental health therapy. Yesterday, Governor Gavin Newsom, while in New York for United Nations General Assembly, indicated that he is likely to sign it. And we're going to keep seeing these legislative wins, as we have already triumphed in so many ways when it comes to enacting policies that safeguard young people from the harms of social media and getting school phone bans in place. Thanks to parents nationwide, including our guest tonight and Mama members, the push for safeguarding technology, ending media addiction, and restoring a play-based childhood for kids is rapidly gaining momentum. 39 states and Washington, D.C. now have some sort of phone restrictions in schools, and 18 states have outright bell-to-bell phone bans, which ban phones for the entire school day, from the first bell to the last bell. This is an incredible accomplishment, and all the reports we are getting back is that away for the day policies have enabled kids to socialize again, spend time together in the halls and in the cafeterias, chatting and playing and looking out at the world instead of looking down at their phones. I know, and you know, how much work it takes to actually get legislation passed and to introduce new policies in schools and to shift community norms. The folks who are joining us here today and the folks in the audience deserve enormous credit for making these changes possible. Thank you for all you have done to meet with school boards, provide sample policies to educators, and for building community support. I see you and I salute you, and I'm so honored to be doing this work with you together. For tonight's edition of Mama's Expert Insight series, I'm delighted to bring you a conversation with two women who are experts on this issue and who can provide us all with insights into why phone-free schools are so important and how to successfully push for these policies, as well as what steps are critical to ensure their successful implementation. Tabitha Branum is the superintendent of Texas's Richardson Independent School District, with more than 25 years of experience in Texas education. Before assuming this role, she was the assistant superintendent, where she led curriculum, instruction, and district operations while developing the district's 5-year strategic plan. Tabitha's career spans classroom teaching, school leadership, and curriculum innovation, and she holds a bachelor's degree in history and a master's in educational administration from the University of North Texas. She's also currently pursuing an EDD in educational administration. She's also won lots of awards, and she is also a school advisor for the Phone-Free Schools movement. Melanie Hempe is the founder of ScreenStrong, a national movement helping families prevent and reverse screen overuse in kids and teens. A former nurse and a mom of 4, Melanie turned a personal crisis, which was her oldest son's video game addiction, into a life-changing mission to educate families about the impact of screens on growing brains. Melanie hosts a popular weekly ScreenStrong Families podcast, and she's been featured in a variety of media outlets, as well as Screened Out, the movie. Her ScreenStrong Kids, Brains, and Screens courses are available for parents and students, and she's also the author of 3 books, including the ScreenStrong solution, how to free your child from addictive screen habits. And we're putting a link to her website in the chat so you can learn more. Tabitha, Melanie, thank you both so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's an honor to be here.
So, quickly before we get deep into the work of moving a school to phone free, let's back up and talk about how we got here. Melanie, you've got 4 kids. At
Yeah.
what point did you realize your oldest son's video game playing was an actual addiction?
Well, the short answer is when we were driving him home from his first year of college, he told me in the car that he had been in his room for a week. He hadn't left, he hadn't finished his classes, and he was dropping out of college because that video game did something to him. That was all, like in one sentence. That's when it hit me. So that's the short answer. But I knew actually all through high school, I mean, middle school and high school, that he was really struggling with video games. And when they issued him a laptop in ninth grade, that was sort of when I lost my ability to influence too much after that. You know, like many parents listening, I was the game cop mom. I did not like that job. I was constantly setting the kitchen timer and all these things. And I kept asking my friends, and this is why I just want to salute you for all the work that you're doing, because we need each other in this space, you know. And I asked all my mom friends, and they said, well, he's fine. You know, you can't be addicted to a screen, right? Like, that's crazy. So with my nursing background, though, I kept thinking, well, he's acting like he's like an addict, like an alcoholic, right? Would act. He had the rage and the anger, and all the warning signs were there, but I missed him because I didn't know. I didn't know there was such a thing as a screen addiction. And this happens with girls and social media and phones, as well as boys on video games. And just the short list for that is they start playing more over time. They're obsessed. They get really unhappy when you have to take it away. Like, that's a big sign. They start lying to you and sneaking. They're dropping out of sports. They're dropping out of hobbies. They're more interested in spending time on their screen than they are with people, and they start dropping out of your family. All these things are signs of addiction that I didn't understand at the time until we drove him home, and it hit me. We were literally in the car when he explained what was happening, and it all came crashing down. You know, I'm sure you've had defining moments in your life. Well, this was definitely a defining moment. And I was like, all these years, I just thought it was him, but it was a chemical addiction. He was depressed. He had all the symptoms. So we had 3 younger kids, and I decided, okay, we're not doing this again. And so what's so interesting that I just have to share really quickly about my daughter, that was, she was in middle school, and it was around the time when we're trying to figure out, you know, we're going to get her phone, right? Because she's going to high school. So I talked to some moms again about what are you doing with the phones in school and the social media and all. And they gave me a card. They literally, in this conversation, reached in their purse, handed me a business card for a doctor. It was a doctor that they all used. All their high school girls were on antidepressants. I am not kidding. This actually was the conversation I had. And I thought, what is wrong? And why are you having to medicate your daughter,
Your healthy children.
your
I mean,
healthy children, to give them a phone? Like that? Like, it was just blowing my mind because, you know, Adam wasn't as much into his phone as he was into his game. But anyway, that's kind of how I came into this space. And I decided that with my younger boys, for sure, we weren't going the game route again. Okay. And, you know, we're not playing Pac-Man anymore, by the way. You know,
these games are very different and they're designed differently. Melanie, it sounds like you had this sort of moment where you had an awakening, not only as a
yeah,
parent, but also because of your training as a
yeah,
nurse.
yeah.
Tabitha, can you've worked right in classrooms. You've also been charged with running schools. What did you notice as smartphones started showing up in classrooms and in schools?
Well, I think for me, my own moment of reckoning as a superintendent really was when I was reading our end of the year climate surveys. Post COVID, we were seeing a significant issue with retaining teachers and recruiting teachers into the classroom. So I was really listening to the voice of our teachers, and I was going through our comments of our survey over and over again. I heard, especially from our secondary teachers, this outcry around what they were seeing with our students in cell phones, and how no matter how engaging they were designing a lesson, the cell phones were always pulling their attention. And even though we had a cell phone free guideline in place, it ended up putting the teacher in a battle with the students when they would try to collect it and try to enforce it. And they were just asking for help. And a part of that help was also this recognition that they needed tools to help them enforce a cell phone free environment, and that to please not put them in the middle of trying to enforce something that would just really limit and inhibit the relationship between them and their students. So for me, the first and foremost thing was I was listening to our teachers, and our teachers said we needed to do something about it.
So you heard from the teachers that we needed to do something. And, when I started Mama, I had friends actually say to me that we would never be able to get phones out of schools. Melanie, there are still so many parents who thinks it's too late or it's impossible to ban phones at schools. Why do you think parents say that?
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad that you're bringing this up because they say it because they're uneducated on this issue and they're parenting out of fear, right? And they believe all these myths. I mean, think about it. We didn't think we could get smoking out of schools either. Remember? I don't know if you're old enough to remember that, but remember there used to be smoking patios in every public school, right? Because kids just had to smoke and we weren't going to be able to change it. But the way we changed it was with educating the kids and the parents, and the whole culture got educated around smoking. And now we think, that's crazy. Letting kids smoke in school, right? Like that's really crazy. So education is really needed. I know that parents think it's too late, but that pendulum swings way far out whenever something happens in culture and it has to come back to center. So what we're seeing now is that recentering of common sense. I started working on the phone free school initiatives here in my town about 8 years ago, actually 7 years ago, when we actually got phones out of our school, and that was a long time ago. So I've been in this space for a long time. I've been in the weeds here. I kind of know how it works. And parents are not that hard to convince if you do it the right way. You got to use science. We got to start letting go of all these opinions and all this emotion, and we have to bring the facts in. And just like we did with smoking, I don't know if you remember in middle school, do they bring in the jar of the black lung? I mean, you
I
remember
still
that?
have nightmares about that black lung. I saw
So
the
sorry,
picture in the
but
book.
I'm a nurse and I did that some in schools. And so but it works, right? Because
It
it
does.
just
It
it's
does work. It's powerful. Tabitha,
yes.
I wanted to go to you, over and over. Um, we've heard from different educators that one of the biggest challenges getting phones out of schools isn't the kids, it's the parents. How did the parents in your community react to the news? And also, how did you go about introducing them to the fact that there was going to be a change in policy?
Well, it was a journey. And I was actually acting as the interim superintendent at the time I brought this policy forward. And I absolutely hear Melanie in terms of the science and using that as a foundation. I knew at that time when I was bringing this forward that I needed to bring it forward as an issue around this teacher retention and achievement and student learning loss. Again, on the heels of COVID, our students had so much screen time. I think our parents were in a place where they recognized that not all students learn well in front of a screen, and that was like my opening. Like that was this moment where I could have this conversation with parents. So we brought it forward. I will tell you, I brought forward a pretty big, bold recommendation, knowing that I was going to stir the community to start having the conversation.
Which was
Um,
what? What was your bold
my
recommendation?
bold recommendation was that we were going to be bell to bell, cell phone free policy. We were going to really adopt an even stronger policy enforcement with consequences that were more attached to it. And accompanying that, because I heard our teachers and that at least when we first implemented, we needed a tool, I also recommended that we would move forward with our Yonder pouch. Because I wanted there to be a system wide tool, a system wide expectation. So it wasn't our teachers in each classroom having to enforce that. So as you can imagine, it sparked a lot of debate. but I was thankful for that because it allowed us to have the conversation that Melanie's talking about. It allowed us to talk about data and statistics. And we were really able to have that conversation with our local data. This is what we're seeing with student discipline. This is what we're seeing with student disengagement. This is what we're seeing our own students saying about their experience with cell phones. So we started with a pilot with the Yonder Pouch at one campus, and it was such a success that we ended up implementing it at all of our secondary campuses. And we're 4 years in, and now our entire state of Texas has now followed that lead, and we are now a cell phone free state from bell to bell.
Amazing. I want to put emojis up in celebration because I'm so inspired and so grateful for the work that you do. Melanie, what steps do you think are necessary for schools to educate parents about going phone free? Like, can you really go in the weeds here about what needs to
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah, and so and I love this question because there's so much that happens behind the scenes with ScreenStrong and what we do and what we learned from all of our experience. I've been doing this for 10 years. So I've been working with parents for 10 years, and what they need, the data is cool and it gets our attention, but you can give them data and it's not really going to change necessarily the way they do things. And I learned this from nursing. Like if you have diabetes, and I can give you all the statistics on diabetes, but what I have to do is explain what's happening in your body. And once you understand that, then your compliance with your treatment will be so much better. So we got into the schools right away after I started realizing all this. In fact, our first school meeting 10 years ago, we were prepped for about 20 people and we had 125 people show up. I was not ready for this. And what I was learning is that a lot of people were struggling. And so I went through the brain science, very simple, in a very simple way. I'm able to explain, the teen brain and what happens and how long it takes it to develop. And it develops from the back to the front, and the frontal cortex isn't there. So no matter how much you try to talk to your kids about, don't click on that app and don't click on that, they can't do it. We're giving them like a Big Mac truck to drive when they're, kids. Like they can't do it. And so once you understand the science behind why, then it changes your motivation a lot. So again, we got to stick with these facts. And we have a slideshow that we did, and now we have ambassadors, Julie, that we train. And so we have all these ambassadors all over the world, and they take our material that's been super updated and it's really slick, and they don't have to invent all that. And they go into their schools and they have these parent meetings. And now it's like, oh, the parents, they get it now. They understand. Even in 1 hour, we can get them to understand the medical piece to this. And then now we're all talking on the same level. It's not emotional anymore. And they go home, it's like, oh, honey, I'm sorry, you're not taking your phone to school. Or, how about if we just get a basic phone? They kind of have their reasons why. And the other thing they need is a clear path from others that have gone ahead of them. So my
That,
kids did
yeah.
not have phones in their school. They didn't have a smartphone until they were 18. And that is a huge testimony to what all the things that are happening in our culture. But they need to see that. People need to see that there is another way out. And again, that's why we did the curriculum for the kids. And the curriculum for the kids brains and screens that you talked about for a second, parents love this. They learn so much. So, if you want to learn about history, pick up a fifth grade history book, right?
It's
And so if you
it's
want to learn about brain science, pick up Kids Brains and Screens. It has all the pictures, it has the
it
illustrations.
has the information and
Yes,
it's
it has
really
all the
presented in
information.
an accessible way. So
And when they read it to their kids, they're all learning as a family. They're no longer the bad guy. The education is
it
so powerful. It is
It
so
is so powerful. And so
powerful.
a critical part here is educating parents to get their buy-in and so that they understand. There's also about, this process with how you're going to implement the policy in school. Earlier, Tabitha, you mentioned that you had this sort of partial phone policy in place where kids had to put it away in the classroom, but that forced teachers to have to deal with it over and over. Can you talk about sort of what works and what doesn't in terms of actual implementation?
Sure. So, knowing that cell phones had become so enculturated into the ecosystem of our school system, at least I don't want to speak for every school system. Our kids were just used to it. And to Melanie's point, asking them to put it away, I mean, it was like we were asking them to give up their best friend.
Mhm.
And that emotion that our students would have when we'd ask them to put it away. And then, it's not just one student, it's 5, 6, 10 students in a classroom. And then a teacher is asking them to put it away. And just as one puts it away, the other one gets it out. And then suddenly you're spending all of your time addressing cell phones instead of focusing on why we're here, which is teaching and learning. And so we knew that that was not going to work, especially why we were really going to have to address the fact that we knew our kids were addicted. They may be addicted in this whole spectrum of what that looks like, but it's like their right hand. And so we knew we were going to have to do something a little bit bolder to help really rewire their brain to understand, at least from the moment you walk into our school to the time you leave, we're going to be focused on helping you grow, and you're going to leave at the end of the day better than when you come in. And so that means we put our cell phones away. So the Yonder pouch for us was really, we knew it wasn't going to, it wasn't, there was going to be issues with it. There were going to be some challenges, but it allowed a system-wide approach. So our secondary principals could develop a system. It was a communication system. It was a way when you walk in, you're holding up your pouch, you're holding up your cell phone. We see you put it in, we see you lock it, and it's put away for the rest of the day. Do we have issues? Do kids have a burner phone and they put it in there? Or, do they have a secret unlocking mechanism? I'm sure that all of that is happening. But the bottom line is they know that that cell phone has to be put away. And if they even think about even bringing it out, not only is there a consequence for having their cell phone, but also there's a consequence for not using their Yonder pouch. So it really, in that first 6 weeks, we saw some issues with our kids trying to play all the games that they will and trying to get around the policy. But I will tell you, by really the start of our second semester of our first year, the kids started to get it. They started to get that it felt good to not have their cell phone out. It felt good to have conversations at lunch and not texting the person next to them. It felt good to not feel like they had to be connected to something. And slowly over time, the number of cell phone incidents we had dwindled to almost nothing.
Tabitha, can you elaborate a little bit on sort of how important it is to decide in advance what the process is, and how important is it to train the teachers and the staff on the policy and come up with an enforcement mechanism?
I would say that's everything. And I would say really that's everything about anything we try to do. Think about dress code. I mean, if you have a policy around dress code and expectations for dress code, there needs to be a system. And I would say it all anchors in communication. There has to be a strong commitment to communication so that everyone understands here's what the expectation is. Here is the system by which we're going to implement this, and then here are the associated consequences. And as long as you're consistent with that, over time your kids get it. And so we wanted to be very proactive. We put out videos. Every one of our secondary principals actually put out a video to model, this is what it looks like when you come to the front door. This is how you're going to put in your Yonder pouch. This is what it's going to look like in the classroom. They modeled, if a student had a cell phone out, this is what your teacher's going to say. And they're actually going to alert an assistant principal. Assistant principal is going to come in and they're going to collect the cell phone, because we're not going to put teachers in the middle of that. Here's what dismissal looks like, and here's how quick we can get you out the door by unlocking your pouch and getting you on your way. So I think that real thoughtful, intentional, upfront, significant investment of time and communication pays off, because we had our parents and our kids say, okay, they really have thought of everything, darn it. Yes, we get it. Like, we understand what we're expected to do. We understand what the consequences are. And so we didn't really have pushback on that. Where we heard parent pushback really was, what happens if there's a school emergency? And what happens if I have to tell my child that their school schedule changed?
So
And
I'm
so,
going to come back to you to answer
sure.
what happens about that a little later in the program. But Melanie, I was wondering if you could speak to this idea of the importance of consistent behavior from adults, because consistent behavior from adults, it plays a role in successful phone-free schools. But I wonder if there are also parallels with successful screen reduction at home.
Yeah, it has to be reduced at home. I think when the school is doing something totally different from what the home is doing, then there's going to be conflict and the child is going to be conflicted over that. So, it's like, okay, you can smoke pot, but you can't smoke pot at school. Like, does that make sense? So, because I mean, their phones and their games and all these things are so addictive. So you have to understand again the science. And we have a lot of our materials, for kids, but also for parents because kids are really smart. They're very intelligent. They can learn the science backwards and forwards, sometimes even quicker than their parents, but they are not mature. And we have a really confused culture that thinks that if your child has a straight A, then he must be mature. It has nothing to do with that. So at home, that is probably one of the biggest reasons that parents give devices too early because they think their children are mature because they're smart. And that has nothing to do with it whatsoever. And the other thing, you can't speed up maturity. You can't, it's kind of like, a physical process. You cannot speed up that myelination in their brain. So you have to treat them like kids. They're kids. They're not able to do this. So at home, that means that you have to change your habits. You have to change how you're acting with your phone at the dinner table and all the things. So it's really a good time right now in culture for everyone to reset a lot of their habits, right? But I do think that it has to mirror because our kids are going to be like, okay, why are we allowed to do this at home, but now we're not at school? It's a very strange message. That's why at ScreenStrong, we set the bar really high and we don't think they should bring phones to school at all. Like I think that's where we'll be next, right? In culture. I think that
Yeah.
pendulum is going to swing. And just like now, we'll look around. If you ever see a teenager smoking, you're like, where are his parents? Did somebody not tell him? And I think that's how it's going to be. Like, we're going to laugh and we're going to say, oh my gosh, remember the days when we used to let kids bring smartphones to school? Like, so I think that that's definitely where we're headed. Because more and more of the science, more kids are getting hurt, all the things are coming out and we just know more. So I'm just about 10 years ahead and I'm watching this unfold. And it doesn't surprise me whatsoever that we're in the place we're in. I'm so excited because 5 and 10 years ago was really tough. It's
Yeah,
really tough.
it's definitely better
Yeah,
now.
and you got to have book clubs. And I want to just say that was the first thing we did years ago with my group here. That's how ScreenStrong got started. There's so much power in getting together in person. And you can have book clubs with your kids can do them. You can do them as adults. You can host it at your house, have a potluck dinner. Hey, let's learn about this screen stuff and just make it a priority in your home. And then the school thing will work itself out. Does that make sense? If we get the parents on board and the kids are all doing better at home, they're going to do better at school as well.
I think that's right, but I've also heard from a lot of educators that the pieces you and Tabitha identified earlier are critically important. That to make the program successful, you have to have buy-in from the teachers, you have to have buy-in
Yeah.
from the staff, not that one teacher is like, oh, go ahead, fine, use it, and another teacher is calling in, the vice principal to talk to them. Tabitha, can you say more about how students have reacted to the bell-to-bell policy that you have in your district?
Yes, well, I will actually tell you that when I was bringing this forward, I had a daughter that was a junior in high school. And I remember before the board meeting, I took her to dinner and I just shared with her, her name is Karis, and I said, Karis, this is something I'm proposing. Here's my why. And again, she's an incredible young lady. And I saw tears in her eyes. And I asked her, "What's wrong? Like, what's going on, and how are you feeling?" And of course, being the daughter of a superintendent is not easy either. So there was that part of recognizing that this was not going to be popular by kids, and they were going to look at her and say, "I can't believe your mom did this," and all of that. But then it was also her own struggle of, I am like, you're asking me to give up something of which now I have become accustomed to having right by my side. And I didn't realize in that conversation with her that for her, it was almost an anxiety thing around
Mhm.
her knowing that she could connect, especially again, my schedule doesn't allow, but she could connect with her dad at any point of the day. If she was about to go into a big test, having a text from him saying, "Good luck, you've studied, you've got this," like she counted on that. Like she had developed kind of this dependency on hearing from, one of us that, hey, things are going to be okay. Or, you have this tryout coming up. You've done all the hard work. So it allowed me to really see what this was going to mean for our kids through her eyes. So all of those emotions were what all of our kids felt when I announced it. You can imagine social media and their response, and it was guttural, y'all. And it was guttural. It doesn't matter if they were middle school or high school students, doesn't matter if they were straight A students or students that struggled in school. I don't know that. I think there were more change.org petitions about this than I've seen about anything else ever.
Uh,
Um,
I was going to just say Audie Cornish at CNN has a wonderful podcast where she spent time with the school when they went phone free. And the principal there described how they had crying areas for the
yes.
kids the first couple weeks because they were so upset to separate from their phone. But I'll tell you, I met a pediatrician in New York who has started asking teenagers to leave their phones on the table during their annual physical, and he sees their addiction symptoms, whether they, they're looking for it, they feel physically distressed by being separated. And the separation that your daughter experienced, not being able to contact her dad, I mean, it's a loss, but also isn't that kind of important in what we need to happen during school, that they begin to develop independence and recognize that you can't contact your parent every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Yes. 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 So really, again, that first semester was rough. The first semester of implementation was rough. The kids struggled. The kids were trying to find every way around the policy. But to your point, our staff, we were consistent. Our teachers believed in this. Our principals believed in this, and we were consistent. And I will tell you, by second semester, I have a superintendent advisory group of students, 12 seniors. And by second semester, they all told me, we get it. We feel better.
It's
We are
great.
we're leaving at the end of the day not feeling like we need to check something, because guess what? I don't have to worry about producing content that's going to get more likes than someone over there. Because guess what? None of us were producing anything, and none of us were able to like anything.
It
So
solves the FOMO.
it really did. It really did. And they really, at that moment of this aha, it was no longer an issue.
So for the guests here tonight, we're going to get to Q&A in just a moment. So feel free to put your questions into the Q&A section or the chat. Tabitha, just a little more for you. I know, as was widely reported all over the country, phones in the classroom contributed to endless headaches for teachers and principals, and ancillary problems like an increase in school fights, bullying. Sort of, how has the bell-to-bell policy affected things like student discipline and teacher turnover?
Y'all, we are like a system transformed. Now that does not mean, please understand, I've been a high school principal long before cell phones were like a thing. And kids are still kids, and there are still altercations because there's a girl that we both like, and we're gonna go toe to toe to see who's gonna win the heart of that girl. But the altercations that were just about videoing so we can see, again, we don't even know each other, but we're gonna meet up and we're gonna coordinate how to meet up, and then we're going to film it and see if your fight gets more likes than mine. Like, that has just stopped. The students taking pictures of someone, again, whether they knew them or not, just to humiliate them and post that and create a narrative about someone. Again, we don't have that issue. School threats, whether it was shooting threats, bomb threats, those have just subsided. I mean, things that would consume our assistant principals and our principals and our law enforcement in terms of investigations. It has just, we had one junior high that I'll just talk specifically. Their discipline incidents were decreased by 66% in the first year. 66%. So when you have an environment where kids feel safe and they're not engaging in that behavior, and our teachers can focus on teaching and learning, and our principals can support our teachers and support our students, it's amazing what it means in terms of student outcomes. On average, our teachers are saying that they see 10 to 15 minutes more of instructional time per a 75-minute block now than they did before we had our cell phone free policy. 10 to 15 minutes. It's an hour a day of instructional time that we have captured back.
I mean, that's just incredible, especially given the decline in reading and math scores that we've been seeing nationwide, which is so critical. Melanie, before, ScreenStrong, you have been a pioneer in helping parents push for phone-free schools.
Yeah.
And we now have the phone-free schools movement guide for parents to advocate to get phone-free schools. Mama has a guide. You also have this 7-day challenge that I think is incredible that, we're going to provide the link for in a bit. Why do you think all of this is necessary? And what else do you think it will take for parents to get the memo that we have to ensure school time is protected?
Well, yeah, we've had a Fun Free School Guide for a long time, and it was mostly for the administrators and the schools where they have to just know what to do. They're so exhausted. And Tabitha, as you know, it's like one more thing. How am I going to do this? There's a lot of complication to it when you're trying to change a policy. So it's really important to have that. And we've had that for a very long time. But what I feel like what's going to be necessary again is things like the 7-day challenge. So the 7-day challenge is what we do. We come into a school, we have, like I said, our speakers. We're really big on in-person events. Of course, we also will do digital events, but we come in and Ambassador runs it. And at the end of it, we issue a 7-day challenge for the school. And you can do it without actually having us come. But what it is that the kids will all agree for 7 days not to be on social media and not to play video games. And so what happens, and it's really to put their phone away, right? Because what they're doing on their phone is, so if they have a smartphone, they're going to be on social media. And so what happens is this is usually done through an advisory class or even an English class, and they'll write an essay at the end. And we suggest they get extra credit for it about what happened in their life and what didn't happen in their life and what the difference was, that they saw. And so this is a really popular thing that we do. The essays, oh my goodness, if you could read them, you would just cry. It is just amazing what they discover when they take a little detox. So we also have a 30-day detox, but the 7 day is enough just to kind of get a taste and to kind of get a glimpse of it. Because again, they're starting to see, wow, that really did make a difference. I hung out with my brother and played soccer in the backyard. And I actually walked the dog with my dad. And I talked to my mom more than I've ever talked to her before. Like they're starting to see that. So anytime that you can practice doing the right habit, we know medically speaking, it's really good to have that practice and it's really good for them to see that. We know that, like in elementary school, all these habits are being formed and their brain is like wet cement in the habits that you do in elementary. And I mean, Julie, I'm like so sad about all the elementary kids that have smartphones. It just breaks my heart,
It's heartbreaking.
um,
It is.
it
Yep.
is so heartbreaking. And why we did the Adventures of Superbrain is the little book that we did for elementary. Like we have figured out how to explain neuroscience to an 8-year-old. Like this is amazing to even just have them understand this. And then in here, we also have the 7-day challenge. So they get to take 7 days, they get to do a class report, they write an essay. It really is fascinating. I mean, kids are so like creative how they come up with how
They
they, talk about it. But high school, it's a little more of they're losing their sense of purpose. So when they do the 7-day challenge, it's like, wow, I practiced piano or guitar, like the whole, because I didn't know what else to do.
Well, being bored is so critically important to
Yes.
creativity and growth. We have a few really terrific questions coming in from the audience, and I'd like to go into those. One of them is about yonder pouches, and Tabitha, I don't know if you want to take this one, and Melanie, I'd love your thoughts too.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on how that works as a system-wide solution? A question about how you and whether you got yonder pouches paid for and included in the school district budget. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So yes, when I brought forward the policy to our school board, one of the requests was the funding in order to purchase the yonder pouches. Again, I knew, could we have implemented this policy without it? Yes. I knew that this was going to be such a shock to the system that we needed this additional set of tools. So yes, our school board in the end did. We piloted it with one school. They provided the funding for that. Again, it was such a strong success, and I allowed the principals to really drive this. We didn't force this upon the Yonder implementation upon them. It was, did the principals feel like they needed it? And so as principals said, yes, we needed that tool, we did provide the funding. And basically every student gets one Yonder pouch. At the beginning of the year, they take it home with them, so it's their Yonder pouch, and it's amazing. Some kids will decorate it to
They
your
can
point,
customize
creativity.
them.
Totally customize it. If they lose one, we replace one for free. And then after that, if they lose it or they destroy it in some way, then after that, then their parents must pay for the third Yonder pouch. I will be honest, our goal is that we work ourselves out of that contract. We hope that we are on the cusp of maybe a year or 2 years away where our kids, it's in culture, a new culture has formed where our kids know this is just what we do and who we are in Richardson ISD. And we don't have our cell phones. And because we have started it so young, that they're going to matriculate from elementary to middle school and just know we don't ever use our phones. And then from middle school to high school, we don't ever use our phones from bell to bell. So it's really, we believe at one point it'll just be what's expected, and those same battles won't exist, and we won't have to use the Yonder pouches.
And we have someone from Illinois here asking that they have seen an issue with students gaining access because they buy the magnet online or at
Yeah.
the hardware store. I'm
And
just,
that's what we saw. Yeah.
yeah, I'm curious. You face that issue?
Yeah, there's not any policy, and unless there are principals and superintendents that are, so far ahead of any implementation where kids don't try to game the system. Absolutely, it's what kids do. And again, I love that they have this creativity that they have in their ability. Um, but again, when they walk in and they have that pouch out and they see that cell phone, they put it in. Might they have a burner phone? Might they have an unlocking mechanism? Yes. But what it has done, it has normalized that we put our phone away. We can't see it. We don't see it out. And if for some reason they are pulling it out for any circumstance, again, there's a consequence for having their cell phone out, but there's also a consequence for not following and using your Yonder pouch. And so again, if they're doing that, maybe they're doing that, but we don't know because we're not seeing the cell phones. So guess what? It's working, and we appreciate that it's working. Again, we hope at one point we won't have to use the Yonder pouches. I don't think the Yonder solution is the right solution for everyone. It is what we needed 4 years ago when we were kind of the lone wolf doing this. We were the Lone Ranger. I was the only school district really in the Metroplex, or at least in the state of Texas, that said this is what we're doing and how we're enforcing it. So we just needed that additional tool. But I don't by any means think it's a one size fits all.
Melanie, what are your thoughts on the underpouch?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of success with just the pouches, and not the Yonder pouches, but just the shoe looking pouches and the pencil boxes and stuff. So in my guide that I have, if you go to our website, ScreenStrong.org, and you go to the school tab, you can download that guide. You can actually see pictures of what they look like. And so we have a lot of schools that can't afford to add anything else to their budget. And this seems to work really well. Even the local universities around here are doing the same thing. I've talked to professors that literally have systems where the kids walk into their class when they're in college, literally, and they put their phones away because we know if it's on their body whatsoever, it tends to be kind of distracting. So there's a number of ways that you can do it. I appreciate what you're saying, Tabitha, that you're wanting to work your way out of that. I agree. I am of the frame of been in this for so long that I don't like normalizing that kids even bring phones to schools, right? Like I want to not normalize that. Like again, I don't want to say, well, you can bring your phone as long as you even put it here. I think they need to get into this habit of not having a smartphone to start with. And if they have a basic phone, maybe they keep it in their car, or they do what my kids did and they go to the front office if that one time a year there's a change of something. I think that for schools that can't afford it, I think there are very, very good options for that. But my goal is to set the bar really high to educate the kids, educate the families, and push back the age that we even give smartphones. And I'm sure y'all agree with that, that
Delay,
anything
delay, delay, the
yeah,
three most
well,
important
yeah,
words.
and anything they need, they're going to have on their laptop anyway. Why do they need this thing in their pocket? And so we're kind of the Lone Ranger out here for many years. Now, not so much. Now there's a lot more people coming on board with wait till 18, right? And not give it to them till then. And I think it's getting more popular to do that. We have a whole lot more uh, physical in-person activities, and in our program, in this curriculum, we talk about a Friday fun night, because when they get done with this class, what they get to do is have a Friday fun night. We teach them, that's the first part of the 7-day challenge. And we literally have to teach people how to do this. Like, this is what you do. You get your friends together, guys, and we put like 6 boys and 6 girls in each house, and they make dinner and they play silly games. And
It's establishing new norms and encouraging
yes,
people to do that. Um,
yes, yeah.
we there's a few more questions here. I'll try and go through them quickly. This one's real specific, Tabitha. If parents had brought the concern of taking phones out of school to you rather than to teachers, do you think that would have been received well? And would it make a difference if parents are coming out as individuals or in groups? How do you think, what do you think is the way to be most effective in communities where that they have not gone bell to bell and people are still trying to make that change?
Absolutely. I think any superintendent would appreciate partnering with their parents on this journey. Because again, I think whether you're a school board and a school board's making this decision, and especially in this time of polarization, anytime that we know that we have partners in supporting a decision like this that we know is going to be disruptive, I think it allows us, it empowers us to be able to move forward in a way with confidence. So yes, parents, we would love, I remind everyone, our schools are not my schools, they're our community schools. And they've elected 7 individuals to create a vision, and they've hired a superintendent to implement that vision. And so, parents, we need to hear from you. And for me, my parents were actually my loudest pushback in the beginning. Again, this was 4 years ago,
Mhm.
and parents were, I mean, it was rough. And parents, that this panic, I would say it was, and this might be controversial, but I would say for many of our parents, it was as addicting for them to know that they could get in contact with their kids at any time, and this sense of, if I can't, I don't know what's going to happen, and something bad is going to happen. So
Mhm.
really working with parents on that, and then addressing what would happen in the worst case scenario
And can
of
you
of an
address that quickly? I mean, we've spoken about it in an earlier Expert Insight series. I wrote an article about this years ago about the fear of school shootings,
yeah.
because unfortunately it's a reality in this country and parents have so much anxiety. But if you, as Melanie said, you go back to the facts and you talk to experts in security, school safety experts, the number one thing that children should do in an event of an emergency is pay attention to their teacher and all the folks who have been trained for that, not be on their phone. So, we have this issue with parental anxiety. Can you explain sort of what rules you set down for how they could contact their child in an emergency, and how they could let their child know if a schedule change?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, to your point, our students have access to a laptop. Now we have significantly reduced the number of minutes that they're even on that laptop, because we recognize screen time is screen time.
Mhm.
But in the end, our parents can communicate with our kids via email. So if there's a schedule change or they need to pick them up early, they can do that. There's also this beautiful thing called go to call the front office, and the front office will call you down. It's a beautiful thing. It works
So awesome.
flawlessly.
It's amazing,
The
isn't it?
it's amazing. The second point around that active shooter situation, it was really us partnering with law enforcement and law enforcement messaging in that time of a crisis. And it could be a crisis for a number of reasons. We need kids following the directions of adults. We
A
need kids
weather
focused.
emergency, anything.
Yes, whatever it is, we need kids focused on implementing the safety drills that we have practiced, and that needs to be their focus. Understanding the safety concern, if that cell phone goes off at a time in which we are implementing that protocol, and it actually alerts the very thing that you're trying to avoid. We implemented panic alert phones in every single one of our classrooms with a single button. Our teachers or a student could hit that button. 911, our safety and security team are aware. They can listen into the classroom. We can hear what's going on, and we can deploy, our emergency management team immediately to the individual classroom. So just painting that scenario and talking our parents through that, they went, "Okay, you're right." And then we shared what would happen on the other side of that crisis and how quickly we would be able to make sure our kids had access to a communication tool to let their parents know they were okay.
So, are there any lessons that you have learned during implementing bell to bell policy that you would have done differently now that you're on the other side? Like, are there any takeaways, since you both were on the vanguard of sort of making this happen? Are there things you wish you had known that maybe you can share with some of the folks who are here to help them as they sort of take this on?
You. Mm.
Melanie,
Okay.
I'll let you go first.
Oh,
Well,
I
you've
thought
given
you.
so many great tools. So it's just, this is
Yeah.
just
Oh, no, I thought, yeah, I think that again, I keep going back to the education because it's like we said about like smoking, without the education, you're going to work so hard. You're going to be chasing and working and you're going uphill. And if this education can be done before all the policy changes or during the policy changes, even for the teachers, we have a fabulous presentation that we do for teachers on brain development, screens, what screens do to a kid's brain, what happens in the classroom, whatever. And when they start seeing that, even after 1 hour, I know it just sounds kind of crazy, but even after 1 hour, it's like, oh, like the pieces come together. So it changes your motivation. And that's what we have to do. And that's what I'm so excited about why the conversation is happening now, because years ago I felt like, the Lone Ranger out there. So now it's really sad that the data is showing what it's showing, but it's also very, very good because those studies have been around for a long time. They didn't just
and people
this
are
didn't
finally paying attention
happen.
now.
Yeah, now we're just finally paying attention to it. But I've seen it based off what happened to my son. I started seeing it way early. And so I just feel like the answer is education, but it has to be the right education. We can't just throw around opinions and even data. We have to continue with the solutions. And for parents, they need a way out. And kids need a way out. And we need to be the leader. And we've got to coach them. We've got to coach our kids around this. And we got to love them enough to do some hard things that really are not that hard. It's
They,
not that
it's
hard, like you're seeing, right? Even not taking phones to school. Wait a minute, we were so scared of the boogeyman. And it's like, well, it's really not that hard. In fact,
it's
it
really
was
not that hard.
so much
Melanie,
better.
Melanie,
Yeah.
you gave us a perfect segue to the last question here. Uh, Question for Tabitha, is your district one-to-one? And if so, is there a discussion of removing school issued devices? And, I will just say at Mama, we are working not only on getting phones out of schools, but addressing this crisis of ed tech, where, technology was rushed into the classroom when there wasn't always evidence that it was aiding educational outcomes or resulting in measurable improvement in education. And then now we're also seeing so much hype around AI, where AI is being rushed into the classroom and being encouraged to be adopted, as early as kindergarten, even before children have acquired basic skill sets. So, is that
Sure.
discussion happening in your district?
Yeah. Yes. So that's a complex conversation. So I will tell you, in the state of Texas, our curriculum does require. We do have technology, Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So there are technology skills that are required beginning in kindergarten all the way through our high school graduates. In addition to that, our state assessment is all online. And there are kind of a beginning of the year, middle of the year, and then end of the year expectations, and our students have to take that test online. So we are one to one. But I will tell you that our team, working with a group of parents and some community members and even some ed tech leaders, we did some work to do a really substantive overhaul of our handbook around technology, where we put in guardrails around how technology should be used and the amount of minutes So again, in our littlest, our pre-K and kinder, we want them on, technology a very limited time. I think we have it less than, I think it's 35 minutes a day for our pre-K through first grade. So really just that minimum time that we
Which is
need to.
amazing, by the way, because the American Academy of Pediatrics used to recommend no screen time whatsoever, under 5, and then it was under 3, then it was under 2.
Yeah, so and we're not there, but we have really worked hard to just try to provide those guardrails so that our teachers know. And so when we're doing walkthroughs, when our principals are evaluating, that's one of the things that we're looking at is how much time, and not even how much time, but in what ways are our students engaging with that screen time. If we're using it in a way that is not how it's intended, then we are providing that training and that support for teachers at our secondary level. We have provided a lot of monitoring tools so that if our students, we limit time in a block, in a 75-minute block, how much time the students can be on, but we've also provided a monitoring tool so our teachers are aware of what is being pulled up on their Chromebook, what they're accessing, and also can screenshot directly to our students' devices so that they're controlling specifically what our kids are accessing and what they can do. It's not perfect,
It's
but
not.
it's our first step of trying to mitigate what we know, is another real concern that we all have for our kids.
Yeah, this is, I guess there's obviously not enough time for us to take on this ed tech. It's a huge conversation. But to wrap us up tonight, I guess I want to observe that what I'm hearing from you both is that for us to successfully move our kids away from screen addiction and provide a healthy and safe school experience, we really need parents and schools to work in partnership. This has been an incredibly insightful session, and I can't thank you both enough for donating your time. Melanie, you've been a leader for years in standing up for healthy kids.
Yeah.
And I invite everyone here to check out her website and all the incredible programs and resources she offers there, including books. And
Thanks.
Tabitha, your work inside your district has really set a model for school administrators nationwide to follow. And for any administrators here who want to learn more nuts and bolts about the implementation process, we're dropping a link in the chat to a presentation that Tabitha made about her work. Big things are happening at Mama this fall. We've been playing a role in advancing child safety legislation across the country. We're expanding to more states, and we have a benefit coming up in New York next month. We'd love for you to join us, and if you're not local, you can still contribute to making it a success, and we hope you'll visit the link on our website. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we're going to be back again soon. Thank you, Melanie, and thank you, Tabitha. I hope everyone has a great night.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank y'all. Have a great night.
Such a pleasure. You're both so knowledgeable. Thank you.
Anytime we order, don't got